So the League of Legends portion of the Esports World Cup 2026 just wrapped yesterday, Sunday, July 19th, with two finalists that nobody expected. Carmine Corp from the LEC, who just got 3-0'd by T1, and NA second seed Team Liquid from MSI, and Damwon Kia from the LCK, who placed 5th in the spring playoffs, meaning they weren't even supposed to be in contention for MSI, EWC, and likely not World based on projections. But yet, they both made it to this tournament, and they both made it to the finals. And that has left a lot of casual fans, pro players, and even commentators all expressing the same sentiment, that EWC is not a truly competitive tournament that shows us who is the best team at this event. It is rather a volatile tournament just for a bunch of excitement with a lot of flaws, to say the very least. And I think the most noteworthy take on this entire situation was Esports Jet with this TikTok that I will show you now.
A lot of debate happening right now about how legitimate EWC should be. I think this is brought on by the fact that KC is doing extremely well. DK and KC are playing in the finals right now, and KC and LEC fans are likely going to want to build this tournament up, and then their haters are going to take this tournament down.
So that poses a really interesting question. How should we weigh this tournament? Not only in comparison to other tournaments, but what goes into rating how important or valid an international tournament truly is. And that's where, excuse me, Jet, sorry, I'm going to close you out because I think that was a good take. That is where the following presentation that I have made comes in. A presentation I like to tentatively call, How Much is Each International Worth? Title pending. We're probably going to be a different title and thumbnail by the time we launch. Okay, so as we can see here, we have the 4 international tournaments of this year, not including the Esports Nations Cup that's at the end of the year. That is kind of its own different thing, a topic for a later day. We have First Stand, MSI, Esports World Cup, and obviously the World Tournament. Now, according to Jat in that YouTube short / TikTok, whichever you prefer, you guys can check that out in your own time. But to quickly summarize one point of his video, the 4 criteria that he listed as what makes an international tournament important is 1, the length of the tournament, 2, the quality of teams that are attending the tournament, 3, the tournament format, and 4, the motivation for each team. And we're going to go in depth on every single one of these examples in just a moment and what they all mean. But before we do that, real quick, I am currently looking, I'm reading off a script, not gonna lie. I am currently looking to switch jobs. So right now I'm sort of in an unemployment mode, which means I have time to devote to making videos. So with this additional time, I am putting more time into each video, which I hope is evident based on this presentation I have made. That is definitely more thorough than my other projects on the channel. As hopefully a lot of you guys know as well, I have a main channel, which is where this image of me in the green screen, although I might be covering it, but I can't do anything about that right this second. So I would like to get back to working on those projects as well, but the only way I'll be able to put in the time that those videos need is if I'm able to go full time, and that's where Patreon comes in. So if you do, well, I want to read it. Oh, I am looking to make League of Legends, both the esport and the game itself, even bigger than it already is, which is a really tall undertaking, but I believe I am the one and only creator that can do it. That's right, baby. If you guys know me, you know I'm a true believer in not only myself, but also League of Legends, the game, and the esport, like I mentioned. So the biggest perk I can offer you guys if you were to sub is that, number 1, I will accept a Discord friend request like I have for a previous sub named Ivan Lukov, who I will shout out at the end of the video as well. He's been super cool, and it's just been really nice to get your guys' perspective. And although he didn't get to it before I did, he also sent me a link to, I believe, the Dylan Falco article that I covered on my main channel the second that it broke, which is just really cool. So it's a nice way to interact with me. I will also do shout outs on this second channel and absolutely do shout outs on the main channel. So definitely consider subscribing if you have the $5 a month to do so. And if you can't financially contribute, I would definitely appreciate then a free sub on my YouTube channel. Check out, make sure that you are not unsubscribed, because YouTube tends to do that for whatever reason. I tend to kind of fluctuate subscribers for whatever reason. Goal is to try and hit 2,000 subs by the end of July. So we got 11 days to do it, and I absolutely think we can. And basically, it's just another opportunity to try and finance the channel through sponsorships. I actually would prefer to be sponsored rather than to be kind of crowdfunded, not because I want to be limited in terms of what I can say, which is a fear when it comes to advertisers, but rather because I just feel like it'd be a way cooler way to get paid than to take like, you know, $5 from everybody, even though you got to do what you got to do, I guess. Anyway, big month for me. I want to see if it's physically possible to sustain myself, even if it's like at the bare minimum. I'll take scraps just to keep doing this because I'm so passionate about it. So however you can contribute, whether it's via the Patreon financially or via the YouTube via a subscribe and a like, I genuinely appreciate however you guys decide to support. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. So with that, let's get into the criteria that Jat had for what makes an international tournament important. So number one, why does tournament length matter? Well, 3 reasons. 1, a higher level of play. So it is said in the past, although I forget the exact interview, that the LCK and LPL domestic finals in summer are the highest level league matches to watch in any given year. Likely the top teams have stayed together all year, so they have essentially gotten to their peak synergy and understanding of how this iteration wants to play the game, and there isn't international stage pressure like there is at Worlds or even MSI, but really Worlds is the one that takes the cake there. Look no further than Chovy choking every Worlds despite being the single best player before the event, and Faker is often credited not so much as being the best player at any given World tournament, but about the ability to maintain his expert pro level play at a tournament despite all the pressure that comes with Worlds, the biggest stage we have in League of Legends. And that is why I would actually like to in the future potentially make an argument about how both T1 and low-key Faker kind of have an inflated kind of like respect amongst the community because of their 3 back-to-back Worlds runs, which is insane. But as you'll see as I go through this video, there's a lot of reasons why Worlds is not the end-all be-all when it comes to who is the best team and players in the world. Anyway, if you shorten the amount of time that teams have to prepare against each other, like as happens when we have a 7-day tournament versus like a 40-day world tournament, right? It is natural that players and teams will not come with their best mechanical skill level, their best confidence, and their best game plans. And in addition, meta read is super important. It takes time for individual teams at the tournament to figure out what is strong every patch, and this then, which also becomes a skill in its own right, is what I wrote, between teams and players. But in addition to the skill of figuring out what is effective in the meta, but in addition, it once again impacts the peak level of play because we are still figuring out as a literal esport as a whole. Every single region is trying to figure out what's good on the patch, who are the strongest champions and builds, and even if only by a little, we are seeing a slightly reduced level of play than the peak of any given patch because we aren't giving ourselves the time to figure that out. Sorry, that was a little rough. The tournament length also tests players' ability to perform at a high level consistently. With little exaggeration, almost any team can beat any other team in the world given the right circumstances. So, for example, in First Stand 2025, every team with the sole exception of CFO, and I believe that was a 5-team tournament at that time, and also CFO was having in 2025 like an LCP domestic dominance, like a domestic golden road. They were like a super team and they got disbanded this year or whatnot. They won every single domestic split, but besides them, the LCK, LPL, LEC, and LCS representatives, at the time called LTA, did not win another domestic split that year. And it speaks to the volatility of not only a short tournament like First Stand, but the fact that they were the champions of the shortest domestic split of the year. The LEC Winter, for example, right? The split ones of the year. And that just goes to show why we don't always get the highest level of play when we have a shorter tournament. In addition, another big portion to what determines how good a team will do is, or why length is so important, is the grit that is required. So every team has a honeymoon period. Recently, in the words of Kadro, who was speaking on Perks' recent inclusion to G2 as now the one and only head coach, it is easy to coach for 2 weeks, right? But are you a good coach 4 weeks in, 6 months in, a year in, when players start getting on each other's nerves, when you can't surprise your players with new anecdotes anecdotes and motivational speeches. How do you maintain hope in those rooms? Longer tournaments typically show which teams are the most resilient, which arguably may counter kind of the peak gameplay that I was talking about in the previous point, but still, I think the difference is that a lot of fans respect grit rather than, I think grit is something that a lot of fans tend to really respect, is I think the point that I was trying to get at there, right? It's why we like teams that can reverse sweep, even when in the case of G2 versus Top Esports, I don't think it's super impressive. Still, a lot of fans find it impressive, and even I do too. I'm just kind of being annoying. Grit is definitely something that I think fans respect a lot more than cheese and early success on a patch, for example. Finally, the other reason why length matters isn't... pause. The other reason why tournament length matters, not in terms of kind of actual level of play, but fan perception, right? The prestige, right? Blink and you'll miss it. I have felt this way since LEC switched to a 4-split structure back in 2023, which is still something I'm very annoyed about. Something about an 8-week regular season and a multi-week playoffs into one of only 2 championships a year, like the old formats of LOL competitive esports used to be, really made all of the championships feel much more prestigious. But when there is room for potentially 4 completely separate teams and orgs to be crowned as the best team all within the same year, it dilutes the accomplishment and makes it less representative of who is truly the best, and more so who is just better on that day, right? Better on that patch even. And 2 great examples of this are Mad Lions in MSI 2023 and MKOI in MSI 2025, who would likely be considered to be less dangerous both in perception and results than G2, despite being the spring split champions domestically, right? It doesn't always mean that they are the best that their region has to offer. And obviously, I just feel like I don't like to go too off script, especially when I worked so hard on this presentation. But I will say another great example, and this is something I Will Dominate always points out, is that, you know, literally within the 2-year span of 2023 to 2024, G2 won 7 championships, which in the past would have taken 3.5 years, and they did it in nearly half the time, right? Just a complete 2. Do we weigh 7 championships now the same way we did back then, right? It is less meaningful. So anyway... that's my Patreon again. The other factor to go into is quality of the teams. Now, why does this matter? And this mainly applies to EWC because all other tournaments do it in the same way, but I think it's important to mention the amount of teams and how far down we go in each region. So, for example, Worlds 2022, DRX was the 4th seed from LCK, and LCK is actually a great example because, as you can see here, this doesn't mean they placed... Oh, what the hell? Sorry, I got a little thrown off there. LCK is actually a great example because, as you can see here, that doesn't mean that they placed 4th in the LCK summer playoffs. So right here, right, they actually placed 6th and then qualified to Worlds via a regional finals. Now, to be fair, this LCK format was super weird as the playoffs did not have a loser's bracket. So you can essentially think of the regional finals as a loser's bracket, but still, even then, DRX was still only the 4th seed. So imagine if, excuse me, imagine if DRX was not invited to the World Championship. Which, not to get too ahead of myself, this would be the case in EWC. DRX is in KT's position from spring, and thus they would not have been invited to the tournament. And that would have been a shame, because DRX was insane this year, and players like Zeka are still finding success as he just won an MSI with HLE. Anyway, getting a little bit off topic. So, imagine if our 2022 world champions were not at the event because of a 6th place finish. T1 and 2024 and 2025, as I'm sure most of you know, were the 4th seed coming from Korea, which in years past would have meant that they would have to first qualify through a play-in stage before making it to the group or Swiss stage. And in the case of 2025, T1 did have to play the one and only play-in series versus the LPL 4th seed Invictus Gaming in order to qualify. So again, imagine if T1 somehow lost this, then our world champions would not have even been participating in the Swiss stage of the world championship, which is pretty insane to think about how close we were to missing the T1 3-0. All right. This year, with Lion potentially upsetting HLE in losers finals of MSI, many were already speculating on Reddit that this would give the LCS and in NA 4 seeds at Worlds instead of LCK getting that 4th spot like they usually do. And many were already talking about the implications about how the LCS, which is only an 8-team region compared to the LEC and LCK's 10 and the LPL's 14 to 18, is pretty insane that they would get literally half the spots, and how arguably unfair this is, and how the LCK's 4th seed not being at the tournament, especially based on literally 3 of the last 4 world champions, it would just be insane. Would T1 even be in attendance at Worlds 2026 if the LCK loses this 4th spot? Well, we didn't have to speculate on that one, did we? Because Lion unfortunately lost to HLE in losers finals in a soul-crushing game 5, so HLE ended up securing that 4th spot for LCK anyway. Now, I'm teasing. I really actually like both Dokkan Inspired, so I'm just joking around. This is more of a joke, but anyway, back to here. So in terms of quality of teams, we'll touch on this more when it comes to EWC, which is the only tournament that does things a little bit differently, but especially when it comes to LCK and LPL, the more teams, the merrier is really the moral of the story here. So next comes the tournament format, right? Best of ones. Oh, well, I guess this, again, specific to EWC here. EWC is littered with best of ones and best of threes, which are always going to be more volatile and less indicative of who is the better team, versus the longer best ofs like best of fives. So as a few quick examples, Carmine Corp versus HLE at First Stand Finals. If it was a best of one, then Carmine Corp would be considered the best team in the world as of March 2025. And then if we look at examples such as EWC 2025, G2 lost 3-0 to FlyQuest at MSI, but then beat FlyQuest at EWC 1-0. Now, even ignoring the other issues with EWC, such as it being immediately after MSI, which is draining for the teams that make it farther in the previous tournament, and arguably the lack of prestige for a tournament that is technically outside of the official LOL Esports annual circuit, just in isolation, which of these 2 series would you value as indicating which one is the better team? It's a no-brainer. You would value that was a Freudian slip. You would value FlyQuest 3-0 over G2 over G2's 1-0 over FlyQuest. And also, who can forget that 100 Thieves beat BLG in round 1 of Swiss in Worlds 2025, which is totally legit, and 100 Thieves is the best team in the world. No, BLG actually did play like shit this year and didn't even make it out of Switch, which is kind of crazy. I don't even know what happened to that roster. I guess it really is just their jungler. But long story short, these are just 2 great examples of how a 1-0 does not really show which team is the best. And it just speaks to the fact that EWC is a volatile tournament at the end of the day. Other examples, if you are G2's new head coach and think that G2 beating Gen G at First Stand was a fluke, you should be in favor of double elimination, since the second chance since the second chance will likely truly determine who is better. At this MSI, had it been single elimination, this is kind of a later slide, but I'll save that for a second. So if this was our MSI 2026, then BLG would have been champion. Lion and G2 would have tied for 3rd and 4th place above T1 and Top Esports, who would have shared 5th, 6th with Team Secret Wales and Furia. However, once we get a losers bracket involved, we got so many more series that recontextualized everything. Team Secret Wales beat Top Esports, which in my opinion diminished G2's accomplishment of reverse sweeping them. And I think, not by much, but I think it diminished it somewhat. And I think had we not all bought into the narrative of G2 just naturally being better or being more amazing than Lion just because it's EU over NA and we're supposed to be better, had we done some MMA math here and seen that Team Secret Wales beat Top Esports better than G2 did and Lion 3-0'd them, then maybe we should have seen the 3-0 coming in hindsight. Now, obviously, as an EU glazer, I do think that G2 did not play to their potential like they at least somewhat did against T1, but even outside of all that, we wouldn't have gotten to see G2 go against T1 or or Lion, or especially Lion going up against HLE had there not been a losers bracket. And overall, that would have been a goddamn shame. Now, another thing that I want to point out here, although I do believe, well, I'm going to talk about this in, oh no, wait, hold up, sorry. This MSI, okay. This MSI finally showed us, sorry guys, do I have it here? Okay, well, sorry, okay, I swear to God, this is my first time doing this, so just bear with me. Okay, sorry. This MSI finally showed us a double elimination where the team on winner's side didn't win again, right? As we can see here, MSI 2023, 2024, and 2025, which was mentioned to me by some fans in the comments on my previous videos, kind of briefly talking about this subject. The previous champions of MSI all came through the winner's side and won winners finals, as well as obviously the absolute finals. So really double elimination technically did not make a difference, again, until this year. In fact, although every team is going to, although every team is going to say this after losing in winner's side, Kanavi called it, saying he felt HLE could beat BLG if they met again, and they did. And even if they didn't win, this year's victory shows that winning two best of fives, whether that be against two different teams like JDG had to do in 2023, or dominating the same team twice like how Gen G had to in 2024 and 2025 against BLG and T1 respectively, it shows that they are truly the better team, right? To quote UFC fighter Daniel Cormier, if you win both fights, there is no rivalry, right? Now, when we look at Kanavi here, right? Like I said, he made the call. Look how confident he looks, right? We've lost pretty heavily to BLG, but if we meet again in the final, I think we can win. And what's really notable, this is a little bit off script, is that the first loss was a 3-1, and yet they were able to come back 3-2. So arguably, it was a lot more one-sided in the first series, but HLE was able to take some learnings and adjust. And double eliminations, that's my biggest point. Double eliminations allow for adaptation, and adaptations pushes teams out of their comfort zone, devalues cheese strategies, and rewards genuinely great play. So in conclusion, the format of a tournament, both in terms of having best of fives and a loser's bracket, only enhance the ability to tell us who is the best team in the world, better than even Worlds in the case of MSI. Can't glaze MSI enough here. So the final factor to think about is, why does motivation matter, right? What is the motivation at any given event for all of the teams to win, right? There's, not to get too ahead of myself, but there's a reason why El Yoya and Caps always talk about winning Worlds and not talking about winning MSI or First Stand or even EWC, right? Worlds is the one that matters. But why is this? Well, there's two main factors, one of which really doesn't apply, but we'll talk about it. So one is money, which is an right? In my opinion, I don't think teams care about this as much. What they really do care about is the prestige that comes with winning these tournaments, which is why World is still considered more important than MSI, right? Where the hell are my notes here? Well, just to cover my bases about money, as you guys may or may not know, there's been a recent article about how the D plus Kia players are owed their salary, so they haven't been getting paid, which brought up this kind of funny meme to me about Stephen A. Smith talking about Anthony Edwards in the NBA and how he is a player with a $200 million salary playing like he's broke, aka playing like his life depends on it. And that is how freaking D plus Kia showed up at this event, since they won the whole thing from literally, like, I'm not a Kalshi guy, I don't think it's like a good thing to do, but if you could put money on it, man, it was probably like 100 to 1, right, that D plus Kia was going to win this tournament. Nobody expected it. It's actually why I was so devastated when they beat G2, even though in hindsight, it's a little bit easier to swallow based on, obviously, they were the outright winners of the tournament. Now, I also put in a little joke there, even though I don't have a picture of it. Look, D plus Kia players reportedly owed 1 month's salary amid delayed organization sale. D plus Kia is looking to sell. Why can't Fnatic play like this, Fnatic fans? Why? So, Really, obviously, as we can tell, it's really not about the money. I think I talk about it more later. For now, we're just going to talk about this. So most people don't even know that there are other international tournaments other than Worlds. Most casual fans, at least. I have a friend named Ray who plays and really likes League, but only tunes in to internationals during Worlds, and I can all but guarantee he doesn't even know what MSI stands for. The branding of Worlds is just so badass. As a side note, right? It's just Worlds, right? Like even FIFA's like the FIFA World Cup. No, it's Worlds, right? Freaking sick. And up until recently, where MSI and First Stand improved their formats, Worlds was the tournament really anyone cared about, right? It had the most participants, it was the longest, it just made sense. Now I think it has a little bit more competition, but that's a story for another day and something for the Riot marketing team to figure out. Faker is considered the GOAT because of his 6 world titles, despite the weaknesses in the Worlds format that I and many others have pointed out that often it is often why casual fans think Chovy is overrated and will never entertain a conversation about him ever being the GOAT. It is why Faker's lack of any other major tournament win, whether it be First Stand, MSI, or a domestic title since spring of 2022, that is an insane stat, and yet literally nobody cares because he wins Worlds. And add to all that, if you remove Worlds and a regular season first place finish or an Asia Games, which is its own thing, and the Asia Games isn't under the T1 banner, there are no other victories except, I don't know if there's any eagle-eyed viewers in the chat. First of all, okay, I thought this was way funnier in hindsight. I just didn't know that freaking T1's current head coach is named Tom. That's a very weird, I guess there is an LCK player named Peter, which my name's Peter, but anyway, I think that's funny. Also, I want to go out on a limb, and I bet you guys all forgot the T1 won EWC in 2024, because I certainly did throughout the entire time of making this video until I pulled up this, not the Tom one, but this picture. I took this screenshot. I literally was like, oh shit, they won EWC 2024. I had no idea, right? And I think it speaks to the fact that this tournament, for a number of reasons, is just weird, forgettable, and overall does not hold much weight, unfortunately. So now that we have set the groundwork, believe it or not, I don't even know how long this video has been so far, let's talk about Esports World Cup. So first and foremost, the tournament length. EWC 2026 was 5 days short. That was supposed to be a cute, 5 days long. It's 5 days short. MSI was 15 days, which is a pretty short, especially considering that it was all best of 5s, and teams typically at most only got a day between intense international best of 5 series, which is very little time to recover and very little time to then prepare against an opponent, which is typically a coin toss as to which team you will be facing, right? Since it's determined by the following best of 5 most likely, right? Who you're going to play next in the bracket stage. And this adds to the already challenging level of pressure. So with EWC, you have a literal fraction of the time you have at MSI, a third to be exact, to play against international competition in a more volatile setting. And in the case of finalist Carmine Corp, they had to play every single day, with day 1 likely being the most stressful since they had to play 2 different teams in the same day, with the second match being an elimination game after a likely demoralizing loss, as any loss would be in such a volatile tournament, against Gen G just earlier in the day, right? Up here, and then the three game series against Team Secret Wales. Unlike, now in terms of quality of teams, this one's a little bit lengthy, bear with me. Unlike Worlds or MSI, EWC, despite taking multiple teams from each region, did not take the top teams based on domestic finishes, but instead took the remaining teams other than the domestic champions based on an online qualifier tournament. So we took all the number 1 seeds, and then the rest was seeded by an online qualifier. So other than the LEC, which had the exact match of their domestic finish, so G2 in first, Carmine Corp in second, and MCOY in third, and CB LOL, fun fact, actually, why am I writing that? Well, whatever. LCS had their domestic fifth, sixth best team in playoffs, aka Sentinels, actually win the online qualifier. LCK had T1 as their online qualifier winner, and DK, despite being domestic fifth place, made it as the online qualifier's third place, and they only got bumped up because HLE, who were the actual runner-ups of the online qualifier, got the first seed because they won the domestic championship, right? LCP's GAM was the runner-up to Team Secret Wales, who won not only their domestic split, but also the online qualifier. Meanwhile, domestically, GAM was the third place team in the LCP, and the LPL had AL and JDG qualify as champion and runner-up despite being fourth and fifth, sixth, respectively in LPL playoffs. Meanwhile, BLG was fourth in the online qualifier, and Top Esports was hilariously tied for dead last in the online qualifier, not even winning a single game. So I don't know what to say about that. It's pretty crazy. So the point of going over all of this is to say EWC did not have the best of each region here. The online qualifier finishes, the online qualifier finishes and the domestic split finishes. The online qualifier finishes and placements and the domestic split qualifier, or the domestic split finishes, show two different stories in almost every single region. Early on, many did not put too much weight on these online qualifiers because they were online, which is a very different environment to playing on stage. And in addition, these online qualifiers were typically held during a break between the regular season and the playoffs. And many teams preferred to focus on finishing strong in the playoffs rather than putting their energy into winning an online qualifier for a tournament that isn't even held in a high regard in terms of prestige, definitely not in the same way as winning a domestic championship or an MSI appearance and potential victory at MSI, right? So as we can see here, I should have had this up the entire time because I had all these notes in this slide. So anyway, you could just see here, right? This was me literally going over all that. Sorry guys, I messed that one up. You could pause and look at it if you'd like. So the format. I spoke at length earlier about why best of fives and double elimination are superior formats that allow us to truly see who the best teams at any given tournament are. So with EWC only having one best of five series and no double elimination, it really calls into question how valid the victories are. Add to that there is more luck involved with single elimination that I should have mentioned in my previous section, so I will get into it here. Yes, if you stay on the winner's side, then that luck that you would have in a single elimination bracket also applies to a double elimination because you are avoiding the loser's bracket with twice as many series you have to play through and thus a worse chance at getting into some really hairy competition. However, at least in a double elimination, there is no getting away from the second best team who probably has a lot of momentum from the loser's bracket. And also, especially in LOL esports, as opposed to, let's say, like a fighting game, which has a bracket reset in the finals, when you could be in the winner's side of a tournament and lose one series, as BLG did to HLE. So technically, the series count was 1-1. And still, HLE was better on the important day, and thus they are the outright champions, which is still deserved because they had to go through losers finals first, something BLG didn't have to do. I think it evens out at the end of the day, and of course, it'd be near impossible to do, kind of a bracket reset in the format of LOL esports. It's just be too much, but it's just an interesting thing to point out because I got to make sure I point out everything. So anyway. So even despite the fact that staying in the winner's bracket is basically the equivalent to a single elimination bracket, at least there is that last best of five that you cannot avoid, right? That you have to get through. Here I am again, forgetting that all these notes are on a slide that have the actual images for your eyes to follow, which would be really nice. So let's see if I remember this time. Sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I think, and I highlight I think for a number of reasons, that if a team were to win all three of their domestic splits and then win first stand, MSI, and Worlds, but fail to win EWC, I would like to think that the general consensus would be that said team accomplished the Golden Road, aka winning every tournament that year, both domestically and internationally, which still to this day has not been accomplished by any team with, not in this order, G2 in 2019, 2014, SKT T1 in 2015 and 2016, JDG in 2023, and finally RNG in 2018, all being the 5 closest examples. In my opinion, I might be missing one, not in my opinion, but just from what I've researched, I believe these are the 5 closest examples to any team possibly achieving the Golden Road. Now, it is literally impossible for us to know how these teams would have felt if, after MSI, they had to then participate in a random, not Riot-run event called EWC, and how seriously they would take it, or how these teams would have performed or thought of an additional tournament like First Stand being in their annual circuit. But then again, the key to me is that EWC, as nice as it could be to some, I don't think should impact the annual global LOL esports circuit that Riot runs, because again, it's not Riot run. And now there may be some of you guys that are screaming at your monitors something that you think I forgot somehow, but I promise I didn't. And it's this, something that adds to EWC, it kind of recontextualizes a bit of everything here. So, what the hell? What is this slide? Well, just to make sure, just to make sure I cover all my bases, I really don't think money is a factor for any of the players or orgs. If you're a player on a top team, you are likely making millions or close to. I am pretty sure getting a piece of the pie, like the winnings. I'm pretty sure you get a piece of the pie when it comes to the winnings, but it is most likely not enough to motivate players to go the extra mile. It is so clearly the prestige that everyone is chasing. Also, the money maybe is important to the org, although again, I doubt it. No org should, at least in my uninformed opinion, should be balancing their books while relying on the income from tournament winnings. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe if you're T1, you can always rely on that mill from Worlds. I don't know. I don't think you should. It is important to note that although the World Championship does reward $1 million to the first place team, at least according to Worlds 2025, which, just for context, Worlds 2023 and 2024 only awarded around $450,000. So I don't know why there was a sudden increase in 2025, although I am certainly not complaining. I want to see my teams, and more money in the ecosystem. But which is more than any Worlds with the 1 million is more than any other event of 2025, including EWC. But when you compare the length of the event to the money awarded to the winner, EWC is easily the biggest return on investment of any LOL esports event, Riot run or otherwise. Again, maybe D Plus was motivated by this just because of their ongoing situation of selling the organization and the players not being paid, but I really think that's a joke, because all jokes aside, especially based on the comments made by mid laner Showmaker, which I believe I have here, after the victory, it seems this tournament was entirely about his and his team's ability to compete for championships and international titles, rather than his cut of the $600,000 prize pool that they were awarded by getting first place. Okay, now we are ready to talk about that last detail that recontextualizes everything. Bonus, the teams were burnt out. So, EWC took place only 3 days after MSI, which would already be insane, but something people forget is that EWC and MSI take place in 2 completely different parts of the world. EWC was supposed to be in Saudi Arabia, but I imagine because of the global conflict in the Middle East right now, Saudi Arabia was not safe or suitable at the moment, so it instead took place in Paris, France. Even if it took place in Saudi Arabia, it would still have required or had the issue of teams having to travel, which is immediately, which is taxing. But I figured this is the time to throw in as many fun facts about the event as I could, so that's why I was in Paris, France, in case you didn't know. In case you're like, I don't know, 30 minutes into my video and didn't know that. Whatever. So jet lag is a real thing. For MSI, EU teams G2 and KC arrived in Korea at least 2 weeks prior to the start of the event. Obviously, Korea has the best solo queue and the best team, so a lot of teams boot camp there. But I imagine that even if the tournament was held in NA, these teams would still travel with enough time to adjust their sleep and find a routine in a foreign place. And this is a video from G2 Rodrigo, one of the coaches of G2, posting a vlog on June 17th, which is almost exactly 2 weeks before the event started. And imagine, they probably flew even earlier than the 17th. So just for some context there. T1, who exited slightly, but only slightly earlier than the rest of the teams from MSI, managed to do the best of any main stage MSI team, and they were only able to achieve 4th place. G2 lost to AL, who KC would later 2-0. So even the best of one excuse doesn't really work here, that, oh, like AL really isn't better than G2, right? Because KC was able to beat them and AL wasn't able to fight back. Then they lost 2-0 to D+, which, despite how disappointing this felt, especially in the moment, obviously with D+ being the overall winners of the event, it doesn't sting as hard, but G2 were clearly not playing at anywhere near their good level, and you could see it in their gameplay. They were burnt out. Lion lost to second seed from CB LOL 2-0, and they went especially far at MSI and had a demoralizing loss to HLE after how close they came to winning, especially again for Inspired, who has not been able to complete a victory against the East now for 3 years in a row. Hanwha Life got 2-0'd by T1, who have continually expressed that they do not feel that they are playing to their potential, and T1 later unexpectedly lost to KC, so it just makes the HLE loss look even worse. And finally, BLG lost to Damwon, who again should be mentioned was the fifth seed from the LCK, even below KT. Again, this loss is recontextualized when we consider that D+ were clearly taking this tournament extremely seriously and came in with rest. But long story short, literally all the best teams massively underperformed at this event. All the first seeds from our major regions did not perform at this event. And actually, one big thing I want to say is that shout out to Gen G. Where do I? Oh well, I thought I had notes about this, but I think this also just recontextualizes how amazing Gen G's win at EWC in 2025 truly was. Despite this burnout that I have spent an endless amount of slides talking about how the format is shitty and that burnout at this event is insane, which I believe the distance between MSI, as we can see, it ended on the 12th, and Esports EWC 2025 ends on the 20th, so 8 days later. It probably had, if I'm not mistaken, I know I just did this research today, I believe they had the exact same time difference between the two events as they did this year, and yet Gen G was able to pull it off. And that was coming off of a crazy run in spring. They won MSI, they won EWC, and continued this run into Worlds. So again, I just want to majorly shout out Gen G, because if I'm gonna shit on this format, I have to reward the team that still showed consistency despite all of this shittiness that I just spent like a bajillion years talking about. So finally, I want to revisit Jat's 4 criteria and talk about how the burnout now adds to all 4 of these criteria. So in conclusion, EWC already has the worst of any international event or even domestic tournament of all of LOL esports in almost every single category. It is aggressively short, even when compared to First Stand, which is 7 days long, and that is also amplified by the fact that there's more teams that you have to prepare for. The quality of teams is called into question because the invitees are chosen via a wonky online tournament in the middle of the split. The format favors volatility via best of ones and best of fives versus the best of ones and best of threes versus the standard of best of fives internationally, and is additionally unforgiving because of the single elimination structure of the knockout stage. And finally, teams are likely not super motivated as a general consensus across the entire world. Are likely not as motivated as the general consensus across the world is that this is at best a lucrative, spicy tournament that is cool to win, but if you lose, it really doesn't matter, and it shouldn't affect how teams and players think and feel about themselves. And when you add burnout to the mix, based on how close this is to MSI, it requiring teams to travel across the world, it not only being right after MSI, but it being right before each team's domestic summer begins, which is way more important as it determines who goes to Worlds, which again is the most important tournament to pretty much everyone, casuals, diehards, and pro players alike. There is no motivation unless you are a team like DK, who is coming in fresh, desperate for money. The quality of the best teams is lowered. The quality of the other invitees is called into question because it's an online qualifier. This tournament should mean next to nothing. Is that the end of the video? Is that the end of the video? Is that the end of the video? It's not. Because, wow, because A little bit more to the story. First of all, shout out Carmine Corp. So first of all, Carmine Corp attended MSI, and yes, they did get eliminated early, so they got 14 days of rest in theory, and also they were in Korea, so maybe 14 days of practice as well, opportunity to play against the other best teams in the world, you know, while they were needing a scrim partner who they wouldn't run into later in the bracket. But they still outperformed AL, and they had the disadvantage of, or arguably disadvantage of having to go to MSI first. AL, who is an LPL team with the exact group of 5 that won an LPL title last year, did well at internationals to the point that T1 had like literally what everybody considered to be essentially the true world finals in Worlds quarterfinals against AL, where AL pushed T1 to 5 games. And did well international. Oh, AL had the rest that D plus Kia had, so they should have come into this tournament in top form with no excuses, and KC beat them. 2-0 no less. Also, AL beat DK and they beat G2, so even if KC had AL in their group, because they 2-0'd them, they likely would have won the first game, which means they would have moved on had they been in G2's place, and that would have guaranteed them a spot in the knockout stage. So KC completely earned my respect with that AL win, especially that it was a 2-0. KC also took down T1, who despite being likely burnt out, and again, have self-reported they were not and likely are not playing to their potential, still were coming into this tournament with a vengeance and toppled HLE, who I guess you could say were especially burnt out since they made it to the finals. And yes, T1 had a bit more rest since they did go out of the tournament a little bit earlier than everybody else after their loss to G2 in the losers bracket. But damn, to beat HLE and then lose to Carmine Corp 2-1, especially after technically the embarrassment of losing to G2 at MSI and being the first time that you've been eliminated out of a tournament outside of the top 4 at an international. It's, in the words of Yike, and I will show you in just a moment, and this is just to show you that KC was eliminated on June 30th, and so they had those 14 full days of rest. In the words of Yike, this is the biggest win in the club's history, beating T1. Woo! However, I also want to absolutely glaze D plus Kia for one, and this is we're very close to the end here, folks. So to go from 5th in the LCK, for Showmaker to go from world champion and world finalist in 2020 and 2021 respectively, to losing Canyon for 2024 and struggling to break top 3 in the LCK ever since, to missing MSI and only qualifying for the EWC, a tournament no one really cares about, and falling to AL in round 1 of the group stage at EWC, and then beating G2 2-0, then beating BLG 2-1, then beating Gen G 2-1, which I know Gen G fell short in LCK playoffs and arguably first stand losing to G2, but what's it called? Before MSI, everyone thought that T1 would lose to Gen G, and it was unexpected that in Game 5, T1 was able to topple them, so I do think Gen G should still be respected and feared, and Gen G also was fresh, as they did not have to attend MSI, and then to completely outclass KC to win the tournament 3-0. Seriously amazing performance just before summer to really shake up the LCK. Kudos to D plus Kia, and kudos to KC. Both teams put on phenomenal performances that despite everything I said across, literally, I'm not going to go all the way back to the bottom, but to show you, but it's about a 40 slide presentation. I think both teams showed up, did something really special, and I all think that despite all my criticisms about EWC, I think that although a volatile system should be indicative of, you know, like more varying results, I still think when you look at D plus and KC's runs carefully, you see a lot of things to be impressed by, to say the very least. So, in conclusion, these are my closing thoughts that I wrote earlier today. I do wonder why this EWC, it seemed like our top teams were so much more burnt out than ever before. If you look at EWC 2025, it's weird that it had near all the same issues as this year's format, this year's length of time, it being super close to MSI, but the results were much closer across both tournaments. The only two things I could point to is that one, in 2025, the top teams were automatically in the knockout stage, giving them slightly more rest. So for example, I think T1AL, Gen G, and G2 immediately had a bye round, whereas all of the second seeds had to play in another kind of like play-in stage. So that gives them slightly more rest and also less teams they have to prepare for. And also with 2025, there were no additional teams that were not at MSI that were now suddenly at EWC like there were in 2026. So I guess everyone was similarly burnt out, whereas in 2026, D Plus and AL and KC relatively all came in fresh when compared to the other teams. Those would be my two things to point to. Otherwise, I'm not really sure why we literally had two finalists that were not even present in the main stage of MSI this year. Anyway, it would be nice if EWC could happen some other time in the year, or honestly not at all. I'm still frustrated that by the LEC being the guinea pig for the multi-split structure, like the 4 splits of 2023 and 2024. I think it did hinder us, and that's something that I talk about in a very long video essay that I hope comes out someday very soon. And although there are things I like about the global splits 3-split structure, as it is definitely more entertaining to have a higher frequency of competition for the sake of so many things. And it is definitely more entertaining to have a higher frequency of competition for the sake of so many things I cannot talk about in this presentation. I think the amount of events and how quickly they happen is leading to burnout and confusion amongst fans. It is diluting the accomplishments of so many teams, and I know unfortunately with the money coming in from EWC and potential new eyeballs, as EWC is an event that hosts multiple different games, if there are any from such a big event, with so many different games happening, I guess there's no stopping it, but I just wanted to give a more in-depth breakdown into EWC rather than my more reactionary takes that I've been having in my second channel as of late. So yeah, that was my EWC video. I will close with a few thoughts in a second, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Shout outs to Adam D, Joshua Bay, aka Epic Josh, my boy Trent, aka Lettuce Plate on Twitch and YouTube. I know him in real life, so that's why I'm promoting him. Unfortunately, if you got a YouTube, I'm not going to promote it. It's just him because I know him. Tristan K, and two new faces, Eric B and Ivan Lukov. So again, if you want to support the channel, talk to me on Discord and get shouted at the end of the video. Definitely subscribe to the Patreon. More amazing presentations to come. Again, and if we get more money, I can keep making these presentations, hire editors to make them even more enjoyable, cut out the uhs and ums and all that good stuff, and then definitely get back to those main channel videos that I cannot tell you how excited I am to get back to making those. So the best is yet to come. I really appreciate you boys so much. I felt like there was one other thing I wanted to say, but I guess if it's important, I'll remember it some other time. It is really hot in here, and I'm wearing a freaking hoodie, and the AC has to be off, and I can't believe that was 50 minutes. That shit was awesome. You guys better freaking like the shit out of it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.